Saboteur on the Atari VCS is fantastic, and anyone into the history of the 2600 or Howard Scott Warshaw's games needs to check it out. Saboteur was originally a prototype made in 1983 by Warshaw of Yar's Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and yes, E.T. fame, but it never saw a release during the VCS's original run. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the game saw a release on the Atari Flashback series of plug-and-play consoles, and around the same time, the game saw its first physical release through AtariAge.com. The game is still available to buy on AtariAge, but Atari themselves recently released the game in a limited edition Atari XP line. Buyers paid $50 for a standard edition or $150 for a limited edition with a nice light-up cart and other goodies. Its release on the VCS is due to that XP series. Buyers got codes to redeem their digital versions on the VCS, but the game is available to people who didn't get the carts for $3. Saboteur itself is the game that Warshaw says he spent the most amount of time developing. In his book Once Upon Atari, he states it took 14 months of development versus 10 for Raiders, 5 for Yars, and infamously 5 weeks for E.T., In the manual for the Atari Age release, Warshaw states he set out to stretch the limits of size and action on the VCS and make a big game, and he feels Saboteur is his crowning achievement. In Saboteur, you play as a robot Syntonian who used to live in peace with the alien Coteal race. Yes, the same Coteal from Yar's Revenge. The Coteal blame the Syntonians for the destruction of their home planet and are vowing revenge. It's up to you to stop them before they build a galaxy-destroying rocket and set it loose. The game plays itself out across multiple screens, each with its own style of gameplay and presentation, and the action is fast and frantic. You start by shooting aliens and Yars as they move across the screen. If they get to the end, the rocket grows, and if it gets built, it shoots into the sky. Helping you are bird-like aliens called Gorfons. If they get to the end of the screen, the rocket shrinks. Meanwhile, there's a master robot shooting down at you and the friendly Gorfons. Whether you stop the building or not, you will eventually move to the next stage, where you need to bounce your shots off the master robot to hit rocket pieces making their way across a conveyor belt. If you get all of the pieces shot, you will not have to battle the warhead in the next stage. Instead, it will explode and you'll loop back to the first stage and keep going. If you don't hit all of the pieces in time, you have to shoot the warhead while it fires back, and do it before the clock runs out. It's this complexity that makes Saboteur such an ambitious and big game for the Atari 2600, and it's backed up with great classic Atari sound and even a catchy theme at the end of each game. To me, it feels a bit like a mashup of a game like Gore 4 Phoenix and Turmoil. The game design is fairly complex, but the gameplay itself is fairly simple. Shoot often, hit everything but the friendlies, and don't touch anything. The overall presentation can be daunting at first, and it can be hard to know what to do if you start the game cold, but a quick read through the manual will get you playing. The ROM on the VCS doesn't include a manual, but you can get a simple and mostly accurate version if you have Atari Vault Volume 2. Otherwise, it's available online, and I'll have a link to it in the video description. I say mostly accurate because the version of Saboteur in Atari Vault Volume 2 is very different from this new ROM and the ROMs distributed through AtariAge. In this version, the warhead scene is unrecognizable, and the gameplay is more simple and more confusing. The graphics show clear glitches, which makes sense given the unfinished nature of the prototype. I searched a bit and couldn't discover how the game ended up so different in Vault 2 versus other releases. I think this new release is based on the Atari Flashback version, and perhaps the version in Vault 2 is the original prototype. If someone knows, please let me know in the comments. Since the version in Vault 2 was previously the only version available for the VCS, it's exciting to see this new release, as it's a clearly superior version of the game. I haven't been able to discern a difference between the Atari Age release and this Atari XP release. They both seem to look, sound, and play alike. Any differences in color and brightness you're seeing is simply the result of the low-budget RF to HDMI converter I'm using to capture the video. The Atari XP version of Saboteur is permanently sold out, but the game is available to buy in the Atari Age store as a physical cart. The digital file for the Atari Age version is not available commercially, although it can be found online, so this VCS digital release is currently the best and easiest way to get the best version of the game. The game looks as good as I've ever seen it, and it plays very well. Since this is the basic ROM, there's no menu for controls, audio options, or other settings. But the game plays great using both the modern and classic controllers. Since this was originally designed for an Atari joystick, it isn't surprising maybe I felt the classic was the best way to play. The Atari XP physical release of Saboteur has the same issue with its standard edition as Aquaventure did, which I discussed in my last video, in that the PCB was installed flipped in the standard edition, so won't play in actual hardware. The PCB was installed correctly for the limited editions. Atari has since announced plans to ship replacement carts and is asking people with non-working carts to send them back in a prepaid mailing. It is because of these physical releases that we have this ROM in general from Atari, so even if the manufacturing side had some issues, we can be thankful for these digital releases. Saboteur is an easy recommendation for anyone into Atari 2600 games, which I have to assume is most of us on the VCS. Fun fact! Atari originally planned to update Saboteur to become an A-Team game before scrapping it in 1983. I have to say, if it had happened, it might have been one of the more collectible carts. An Atari A-Team game from 1983 with back then label and box graphics? Just think how collectible that game would be in 2022. Saboteur will never match the sales it could have had if it hadn't pitied the fool and walked away. Thanks for watching. I'll have more videos in the coming weeks, including a look at Yar's Return, more MS-DOS titles, and anything that gets released in the VCS. Liking spreads the word about the channel, and subscribing gets these videos in your feed. Have fun!